Here are some common IT controls in an audit. We've got this whole section. It is internal controls. And you hadn't noticed, it is also information technology controls. So while we do have these traditional accounting controls, we are going to talk about IT. We're going to talk about all the wonderful ways that IT is implemented. And as the months go on, the CPA exam loves to implement more and more when it comes to IT. We're going to talk about that and much more. Now, there are many different types of IT controls that can be present in an audit. Some common controls are going to include we've got access controls, change management controls, data backup and recovery controls, and security controls. Now, what are access controls? These controls restrict access. I mean, kind of simply put, passwords, user IDs, two-factor authentication. These are just access control, limiting access to systems and to procedures to program. Change management controls. These controls ensure that changes to systems and data are made in a controlled and authorized manner, meaning you can't go in and edit a database without entering a password, getting approval from someone else. A message gets sent to someone's phone. They have to approve it. Change management controls typically include change control boards, change requests, and impact analyses. Really, I mean, these are aggressive, much more aggressive controls. Like I said, it could be something as simple as sending a message to your manager's phone. The manager has to then approve it so you can get in and edit the system. We have data backup and recovery controls. Now, these controls ensure that critical data can be recovered in the event of a system failure or data loss. We talk about this, in our business environments exam where we talk about data disaster recovery plans. These are going to include regular backups, offsite storage of backups. We've got incremental backups, lots of different things. We're not going to get into that for this exam. It's not critically important. And then security controls. These controls protect systems and data from unauthorized access, use, or modification. This is going to include firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention systems, and encryption. Really anything just generally to protect your data, to protect your organization. What are the auditor's responsibilities regarding IT? All right. Now, when we deal with audit and attest standards, these require that the auditors obtain an understanding of the entity's internal control in addition to their IT control, right? That's very important, whether it's IT control or normal, I say normal, but I'd say traditional accounting internal controls, right? Controls that you would have seen 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Okay, maybe let's say like the 1980s. I don't know when you're watching this. Maybe this video is taken off and you're listening to this in the year's 2050. The AICPA has issued guidance on how to obtain an understanding of an entity's internal control over financial reporting, which includes assessing control risk. Shocker, we did see this in audit risk. In addition, the AICPA has issued guidance on using IT in an audit of financial statements. This guidance includes a section on using IT to perform audit of internal controls over financial reporting, talking about kind of hinting at integrated audits as well. The guidance discusses the use of various types of IT control testing, including entity-level controls, application controls, and general controls. Now, the AICPA's guidance on using IT in an audit also includes a section on using data analytics in an audit. We're going to deal with IT more in our subsequent slides and dive into that in much further detail. Now, data analytics, what is that? That's a process of inspecting, cleansing, transforming, and modeling data with the goal of discovering useful information, suggesting conclusions, and supporting decision-making. Data analytics can be used for many purposes, including to identify risk areas, to test controls, and to perform substantive tests. Data, big data, right? Remember when that was a hot word? I think that was 2017. A little throwback there. Buzzwords, gotta love them. But yeah, I mean, data is pretty important, and it is something that we can utilize in an audit. The reliability of that data, let's talk about that. By utilizing IT and audit data analytics and engagement, fraud detection becomes more reliable. You can do a more wide berth of testing when you have all of this data to analyze. And the auditor can analyze the data to make better decisions, create data visualizations. I mean, oh man, my time in public accounting at the Big Four, that was such a hot topic. That was if you were good at these data visualization softwares, you would be on top of the world. And to understand the business better. Now, let's talk about acquiring data. The less it needs to change hands, the more reliable it is. When we think about just if an auditor obtains data directly from the client's bank, this is more reliable than the client requesting the information from the bank and passing it on to the auditor. Because if you get it directly from the bank, okay, yes, maybe the bank has some reason they'd want to modify the data. In reality, they probably don't. They're just going to give you a bank statement, or you log in, get the bank statement, However, and maybe the client doesn't, it's kind of like playing telephone, right? Just the game of telephone. Every time information changes to another hand, it has a chance of being edited, reformatted. But also, the more parties it passes through, the more it can be maliciously edited. So, just something to keep in mind there. Other factors that reduce the reliability of data are having copies over original sources. Right? It just makes sense. I mean, original sources, original documents are more reliable than copies. That varies. Copies are totally fine in some instances, but just a general rule, obviously, having the original document is much more preferable. And if the process for collecting the data has not been tested for control effectiveness, you're logging in to get some data in the accounting system, but you haven't really tested controls for that, not going to be as reliable as if you did test those controls. Here are a couple terms that I want you to memorize. These are different ways to analyze data, different analytics methods. We've got four of them here. We've got diagnostic, prescriptive, and we'll get into descriptive and predictive. Now, these are four processes. Diagnostic analytics, this is the process of identifying problems or issues within a company. We're diagnosing the problem. We also have prescriptive analytics, right? Think about a prescription, the process of providing recommendations on how to solve those problems. Then we have descriptive analytics. This is the process of describing the data, such as identifying patterns and trends. And lastly, predictive, the process of using data to predict future outcomes. Just be familiar with these terms. I mean, it's kind of in the name as well, as you obviously see. However, whether it's fully memorizing them or just becoming very familiar with them, definitely want you to do that. What is a generalized audit software package? Here's a new concept. I mean, maybe you've heard of it before. And if not, I'm going to go through it and talk about it, what you need to know for the purposes of the exam. Now, also known as a GAS, generalized audit software. I mean, I can't say I experienced the term used in my public accounting experience. However, I mean, yeah, this is definitely something that exists and definitely something that I utilized. But, I can't say it was called the generalized accounting or audit software. However, as I describe it, you may be like, oh, yeah, I remember using that in my time in auditing. Now, this is used in many companies to perform routine audit procedures, essentially helping you to automate the audit. Think about how we use Salesforce. Think about how you use Microsoft Office. These are all things that you could really do without. Obviously, it makes it much more efficient. Yes, like you could drive over to someone's office or walk over to their office, whatever it is, obviously depending on how far it is, instead of just having a Teams meeting or instead of having a Google Meet or whatever that is. But it automates that. You can send someone a letter, but what's an easier way of doing that is sending them a message through your generalized firm-wide software. Similarly here, this generalized audit software, this is a concept where it takes the audit, takes the processes you need to do, and just integrates it into the 21st century, right? It automates it, creates checklists. Think of like just QuickBooks, but for auditing. It's just, I could list a bunch of different softwares that it kind of remedies, that it kind of emulates. It's a software purchased as a package, and each company selling it offers diversity in the software's capabilities. I'm not going to get into examples of it. I'm going to be honest, also, a lot of firms internally develop their own, so they have control over it. That's something you may have seen as well. Now, this software performs routines on files, uses various calculations, so maybe there's a process within that software where you just automatically upload the trial balance. It's going to automatically do analytical procedures for you. Right? We talk about all of this. Now, even though it does that for you, it's obviously quite important to understand the underlying methods behind materiality, behind analytical procedures. Maybe this software is going to determine materiality for you based on the inputs you put into it. Obviously, very helpful and automated, computerized. And that's the way our world is moving, isn't it? Now, printing reports based on the information used. Standard audits are performed by analyzing sample information from a company's records, and random information is chosen and analyzed, since investigating all information is too time-consuming. Kind of a nice catch-all, right? Obviously, instead of you using your human eyes to scan everything, we have a good old computer doing it for us. This software allows auditors the ability to sort through large amounts of data in a rapid manner. Now, this GAS can scan and test all data within a computer system, allowing for a more accurate audit of the books. Instead of random sampling, 100% of the company's data is examined. Now, let's just address this point, because within sampling, we say the purpose of not sampling absolutely everything, even if you could quite easily with this, is because you don't want to take responsibility for more than you have to. In an audit, if you say you sampled 100% of the data and you accidentally miss some issues with some of that sample data, you're taking responsibility for more than what you needed to test. Now, what you would do here is, yeah, you would sample everything, right? You would test everything. However, when it came to actually presenting that in your audit report and your documentation, you would only use the required sample. This is just kind of like a backup check where you would be able to go in and take a look at everything overall and then select the samples you need from it. So it's kind of right. We talk about nonstop throughout this exam, limiting liability, limiting responsibility on each party. That is kind of what we're talking about. Now, lastly, here, this software is designed to examine financial information for quality, completeness, correctness, and consistency. It verifies all calculations, compares data, and prints audit samples. Just generally, TLDR here, this software is going to automate the audit process as a whole. Like I said, there are varying levels. You could have one that a smaller firm may use where it's obviously a lot more affordable. You could have one where a massive firm uses it. And like I said, also, you could have firms developing internally their own generalized audit software packages. Now we're going to move on to this concept called computer assisted audit techniques. I'll refer to it as computer assisted audit tools sometimes as well. It really is kind of one and the same. These techniques or tools consist of softwares, of programs, internet based programs, or maybe downloadable based softwares where you as the auditor are going to use these for data analysis and just your general audit software, as we mentioned. Now, data analysis CATs help auditors examine large volumes of data more efficiently and effectively to look for patterns, relationships, and anomalies that may indicate error, waste, or fraud. This is going to be something that really you can use in any job. I mean, any job is going to go through a lot of data, whether you're in insurance, finance, accounting, whatever it is, you're going through large amounts of data. These are just programs that are more tailored towards accounting and specifically auditing. These audit software CATs help auditors to test controls and perform substantive tests on electronic data. Now, here are different types of CATs. If we refer to transaction tagging CATs, embedded audit module CATs, integrated testing facilities, so these are just different types. I want to start over here because this is kind of what we saw already. The generalized audit software package. This allows auditors to perform testing controls and substantive tests directly on the client system. This is just, if you think of like just again, think of it like QuickBooks except for auditing. I mean, I just say QuickBooks because I think that is one of the more common softwares you may have worked with. So that's just what I'm going to use. However, if it's an internal system or just whatever the client system is, think about it like that. Except this is how you're going to facilitate and automate your audit. Next, I'll go from right to left. Why not? Like to mess it up a little bit. Well, test data. This is a test data CAT. This is kind of more data analytics, as we said. So this is overall audit. This will make sure that you input all your documentation for your planning. It'll make sure to do data analytics for you, analytical procedures. This is more just, probably a subset of the generalized audit software or separate, where this is just processing data, analyzing it, giving you feedback on it. This is going to process test data in the client system offline, contains invalid conditions. This is going to say, okay, this doesn't make sense. We're looking at the pay rate, the hours, and if those don't match up to our payroll expense, then it's going to give you an invalid error, kind of look for those issues for you. We have also a parallel simulation. This is where you're going to reprocess client live data in the auditor software. Now, it's kind of just copying the client's internal system and reperforming and recalculating. So we think of those auditing procedures of recalculation, reperformance. This is saying, okay, in the client software, the purchase order goes here, and then it gets approved, and then you actually purchase, and then it gets paid, and then we recorded the disbursement of cash, right? You just see that process. Now, this parallel simulation is going to do that same thing, just kind of on a test server. So it doesn't actually affect the client's data because you don't want to get in there and mess with their accounting software, right? Now, we have an integrated test facility. This CAT, again, just a reminder, these are all different types of CATs, these 6 different computer-assisted audit tools and techniques. Here, we're going to test data commingled with live data in the client system. This is going to use dummy accounts, and personnel is not informed here. It's similar to a parallel simulation, except this is just less in conjunction with the client. You're kind of doing this on your own by yourself. You have embedded audit modules. This collects transaction data for the auditor, and the auditor is part of the design. Not as important as some of these other ones. And lastly, transaction tagging CATs. These are going to mark transactions, allow the auditor to follow them through the process. So some of these you would find within other ones, but just generally want you to get an idea of what we're looking at here. I'd say the most important ones would be These three, and we had a whole slide dedicated to this. Now, transaction tagging could be implemented with some of these other ones, but just to give you a general idea, it's not like you're going to see a lot of questions on this, but these are terms that you may see, and maybe you get a question on one of them. So be familiar as possible, but focus on stuff like those audit opinions and different types of engagements and criteria for them primarily. Talking more specifically about that CAT we saw, which was the test data approach. Now, this is a set of data which is tested through the client's IT controls and business process. However, the auditor already knows the results of the data. So, getting more specific about this CAT, if the data is processed and is not in the form that the auditor expected, there may be an issue with the control or process, kind of really facilitating analytical procedures. You have an expectation, you already know the result, and you're going to process this through the system. And if it comes out incorrectly, then you know there may be an issue. And the first step of the test data approach is to first understand the client's business and information technology process, and to then develop a testing approach that's tailored to the specific risks and controls identified. What does that mean? Well, if we're dealing with revenue, our inherent concern is overstatement of revenue. We are worried about understatement as well, but the inherent concern there is overstatement. And expenses, it's the opposite. We're worried about understatement of expenses. However, they could be overstated as well. The approach should consider both automated and manual controls, and testing should be conducted at various levels, including entity level controls, application level controls, and general computer controls. Testing should be conducted on a sample basis and should be designed to provide reasonable assurance that the controls are operating effectively. An integrated test facility, we're diving into this one a little bit more as well. This is going to be a controlled environment, as we mentioned, within an organization where audits of IT can be conducted without disrupting normal business operations. The last thing you want to do is, even if you're not worried about permanently messing up the client's files or the client's system, you just don't want to interrupt their business process. You want to let it continue as normal. Again, last thing you want to do is be the auditor. They're hiring you to do a service, and you're messing with their business and costing them money. An integrated test facility allows fictitious and real transactions to be processed together without the client operating personnel being aware of it. So this is really the client. If any of those personnel are trying to commit fraud, well, they're not aware of this, so they can't commit fraud on those specific transactions. And you're operating this system as it should be. And if you see any issues with it, then you know there could be some fraud or error. This allows the auditor to test the effectiveness of IT controls in a realistic setting and to identify potential control weaknesses. Here's just a recap here. It is, again, just we obviously went over this, but take another look at it if you want to reinforce that in your mind. Moving along here. A few more slides here, and these are going to be IT roles that should be segregated. Now, we talk about, especially in our revenue cycle, investment cycle, inventory cycle lessons, all of the traditional accounting roles that should be segregated, who has custody, authorization, and record keeping abilities. However, here, since we're in internal controls and IT specifically, these are different personnel, and you may not be as familiar because not everyone's going to be as familiar with IT. They don't necessarily work in IT. A lot of accountants are just trained with the traditional accounting. You have your AP department, AR department, disbursements, receipts, etc., mailroom. However, these are IT roles which should be segregated and following that same logic, because when it comes to data and systems, there is custody, authorization, and record keeping. Now, the control group, who is that? Those are and these are all individuals. You could have one or multiple, depending on the size of the organization. Control group is going to be responsible for ensuring that IT systems are running smoothly and efficiently. They monitor and troubleshoot any issues that may arise. Now, operators, these are going to be individuals who are responsible for running and maintaining the IT systems. This includes ensuring that all hardware and software is up to date and functioning properly. You may see that some of these look similar to each other. Got to look for the differences here. Right? Operators are going to ensure that all of the hardware and software is up to date. Control group is kind of maintenance. Right? This is operators are more setup. Control group is more maintenance. And programmers are responsible for developing and maintaining the software. For programmers, solely software. This includes creating new applications and updating existing ones. Analysts are responsible for analyzing the data that's stored on the IT systems. This includes understanding how the data is being used and identifying any trends within that data. Lastly, here are librarians. Just like librarians store books, these are going to be responsible for managing IT systems documentation, storing all that data. This includes keeping track of all changes that have been made to the system and ensuring that all documentation is up to date. Lastly, here, we see this in our audit evidence lesson, but I want to bring it back up because it's quite important. And also, we get audit evidence possibly through solid internal controls. We want to get evidence of effectively operating internal controls. Now, the reliability here, we're going to see it's going to increase as we go up. What is the most reliable piece of audit evidence? Well, that's something that the auditor directly witnesses or the auditor knows. Also reliable, but not as reliable as any external evidence. That's going to be any third-party inquiries, third-party confirmations, anything. So something that's less reliable, we're just going down the list. Internal evidence, that's going to be any reports from within the client. Obviously, that's not as reliable as something that you directly witness because they could edit this, the client could mislead it. And then lastly, least reliable is just oral evidence. If it's not documented, it's just someone saying something. And proof on paper is a little more concrete than someone just saying something. I mean, humans are fallible, right? Doctor, we're not perfect. And with that, last slide here before we wrap it up with a nice summary. Hope you all enjoyed this lesson. I know I did. Keep powering through and get as many questions done as you can. Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material? We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.